Yeah, I mean, that's obviously a much larger discussion, but I think first of all, you show the limitations of that view. You also show that that view itself is not just to be taken. People in the modern world, they have the luxury of not having to argue for their view because it's taken for granted, right?
Yeah.
But when you say prove to me that nothing exists except what's empirical, like that's not a scientific, that's a philosophical argument. And most people are not really that prepared to defend it because they just take it for granted, and they have the luxury to do so because it's the dominant paradigm. So one is just to critique the assumptions philosophically, right? Which we can't do it here, but like, that's what you would have to do, like critique the assumptions philosophically. The other thing is to show the inadequacy of the paradigm. And part of what I say is like, we as human beings, we're human beings. And there are things about us, like, even among modern people today, like in the secular world, there is a debate about, mind. Like for the modern period from Descartes on, the modern paradigm has basically, in its majority, has viewed mind as something different from the body. So you have this mind-body dualism, and there's been a lot of talk about how can you reconcile, how do the mind and body interact? But the idea is that most modern people are willing to concede that the mind is something that is not reducible to our physical bodies. It's coordinated with it. And when you have brain damage, then your mind and your cognitive abilities and your self-conscious, that's all affected. So mind and body are certainly coordinated, but most modern people traditionally have been willing to concede that, okay, the mind is something that's substantively different. It is not a material thing. So already there's like a crack in the materialist kind of, view if you allow for a mind that's not reducible to matter. And this is a debate that's going on not between theologians and scientists, but among scientists and philosophers of scientists and philosophers themselves, regardless of religious commitment, right? So the idea of the whether mind is reducible to matter or not. So, we could say like the majority still seems to be, of course, the real hardcore materialists will say, no, of course, mind must be reducible to brain function. But many people don't agree with that, even in the modern world. And I would say that, if you take the mind as something which is not in principle, not reducible to matter, and also something like the soul is not really reducible in principle to the physical body. And then you take things like cognition, language, meaning, the fact that we have self-awareness, all of these things are like big mysteries that even modern science can't really solve. Okay. Also our moral sense, the sense that, we have a sense of right and wrong. Every human being has this, even if they disagree on the details. Like every human being has a sense of, no, that is right and morally wrong. All of these things, it's very difficult to see how a materialistic paradigm can really, adequately account for the existence of these aspects of the human being, or how these aspects can be even in principle reduced to just physicality. Do you see what I'm saying?
Right.
And if you're going to say, well, we're basing everything just on empirical science, like physical nature, right? Then I would say, okay, but in principle, you cannot explain even fundamental aspects of what we know to be true about ourselves, our consciousness, our moral sense, our apprehension of meaning, our language capabilities. All of these things, are not even, I think you can make strong arguments that these are not even in principle capable of being reduced to just the physical. And if that's true, then the modern paradigm that is, banks everything on the physical is self-refuting, because there are certain aspects of reality that we cannot deny. And I'm not talking about God and angels and things like that, but just things about ourselves, which we all know to be true, which in principle cannot be adequately explained by a materialistic paradigm. And if that's true, then the materialistic paradigm itself is false. Do you see? As a paradigm, as an entire worldview. There's a book, 2011, called Mind and Cosmos by an American philosopher called Thomas Nagel, Nagel. And the subtitle of that book, Mind and Cosmos, the subtitle is like, why the neo-Darwinian materialist conception of the world is almost certainly false. I mean, it's a long subtitle.
Right.
And he's an atheist and continues to be an atheist, but he says the very reality of the human mind, okay, throws into question the entire modern project. Because the mind, by its very nature, by what we know and experience it to be, again, he's an atheist, but the mind that we know and experience, okay, is not even in principle reducible to matter or a material explanation. And therefore, the entire project, which tries to conceive of all of reality in terms of just matter and therefore physical science, is completely inadequate for even in principle being able to explain something like the mind, right? So these are arguments that you can make about the inadequacy of the modern paradigm, that it's myopic, it is artificially restricted to just one or two things, and that those one or two things force us not to be able to explain things that we know to be true about ourselves. Quite aside from theological commitment, that's one aspect